Israel launched a daylight attack on Tehran on Saturday, with smoke seen rising from the center of the Iranian capital as Iranian media reported strikes across the country. According to the report, the first apparent strike took place near the offices of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It was not immediately clear whether Khamenei, who is 86, was present at the time. The article says he had not been seen publicly in recent days as tensions with the United States intensified. Roads leading to his compound in downtown Tehran were closed by authorities as additional blasts were heard across the capital. Iranian state television later reported on the explosion near his office, but did not provide a cause. Authorities also gave no immediate casualty figures, while Iran shut its airspace and mobile phone services were caught as the attacks unfolded. The report says the United States is participating in the strikes, citing a U.S. official and another person familiar with the operation, who spoke on condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the military action. At the same time, the full extent of the American role was not immediately clear, and the White House declined to comment right away. An official briefed on the operation said the Israeli campaign was aimed at Iran's military, symbols of government, and intelligence targets. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz described the attack as an effort to remove threats, though he did not provide further details. As the strikes took place, sirens sounded across Israel. The country closed its airspace, and the Israeli military said it had issued what it called a proactive alert to prepare the public for the possibility of missile launches toward Israel. Several hospitals in Israel activated emergency procedures, including moving patients and surgeries to underground areas. The attack comes at a time of already severe regional tension, centered on Iran's nuclear program and the possibility of wider military conflict. The article says the United States had assembled a large force of fighter jets and warships in the region in an effort to pressure Tehran into an agreement over its nuclear activities. It also notes that Iran had sought to avoid war while maintaining that it has the right to enrich uranium and does not want talks expanded to include issues such as its long-range missile program or support for armed groups including Hamas and Hezbollah. Even as diplomacy continued, Iran had warned that American military personnel and bases across the region would become targets in the event of retaliation. The report says it was not immediately clear whether Iran would respond right away, but the threat of a wider confrontation remains central to the situation. That military escalation has unfolded alongside another round of U.S.-Iran negotiations brokered by Oman in Switzerland this week. Those talks focused on the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi said on Friday that substantial progress had been made and that a peace deal was within reach. However, President Donald Trump struck a different tone the same day, saying he was not happy with the pace of the negotiations. The article describes that contrast as part of a wider disagreement over whether diplomacy can still prevent war, especially as threats of military action continued to loom over the talks. The report says Iran insists it does not have and will not build a nuclear weapon, while Trump has stated that he will not allow Tehran to acquire one. It notes that this position is one he shares with former Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden. The article also revisits the earlier international agreement negotiated during the Obama administration to restrict and monitor Iran's nuclear enrichment program. It says Trump criticized that deal during his first term, called it horrible, and withdrew the United States from that pact. During his first term, after calling it horrible, since returning to the White House, Trump has repeatedly warned that Iran could face military strikes if it does not agree to a new deal limiting its nuclear activity. It adds that despite warnings from many countries in the Middle East and elsewhere that a U.S. attack could trigger a major international conflict, Trump has ordered what the article describes as the largest American military buildup in the Middle East in decades. That military pressure was accompanied by practical security measures. The article says the U.S. State Department authorized non-emergency American personnel and their family members to leave Israel on Friday because of unspecified safety risks. It adds that many other countries had also urged their citizens to leave the region amid a concern over a possible new war. Against that backdrop, CBS News sought analysis from people with deep knowledge of Iran and its hardline rulers to assess the chances that the negotiations could still produce an agreement. Before turning to outside analysis, however, the article lays out the positions expressed directly by both governments. It says in his 2026 State of the Union address, Trump repeated his claim that the United States had obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program in June, a claim the International Atomic Energy Agency has recently cast doubt on. In that same address, he said that despite earlier warnings, Iran was starting it all over again and was once again pursuing what he called sinister ambitions. Even so, the report says Trump has repeatedly maintained that he prefers a diplomatic solution, while also making clear that he is prepared to use military force if he considers it necessary. The article notes that in his address he also claimed Iran had never ruled out building a nuclear weapon. In contrast, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, said shortly before Trump spoke that Iran would under no circumstances ever develop a nuclear weapon. The report quotes Araghchi as saying there was a historic opportunity to reach an unprecedented agreement that addresses mutual concerns and serves mutual interests. He added in a social media post that a deal was within reach, but only if diplomacy is given priority. The article presents those comments as part of Iran's public effort to signal openness to an agreement, while still defending positions that remain central to its negotiating stance. One of those core points is uranium enrichment. The report says Trump has previously argued that any new agreement should require Iran to fully abandon all domestic uranium enrichment, a demand Israel has also strongly supported. Tehran, however, has said that condition is unacceptable. Araghchi repeated that view in an interview on CBS's Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, saying enrichment is Iran's right. He said Iran is a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and therefore has every right to pursue peaceful nuclear energy, including enrichment. The article says after the latest round of talks on Thursday, the veteran Iranian diplomat acknowledged that differences still remained, but he also said there was now an understanding on some issues. He added that there had perhaps been more seriousness on both sides than before, with the aim of reaching a negotiated solution. The article goes on to say that Araghchi announced teams from Iran and the United States would soon begin working with the IAEA to address certain technical issues. He said that after consultations in their respective capitals, the two sides would move to a fourth round of negotiations next week. Taken together, those remarks form the article's account of the first half of the diplomatic breakdown: direct military threats, active mediation, sharply different public messages from Washington and Tehran, and continuing disagreements over the core question of enrichment. Even before the latest strikes in Tehran, the article makes clear that diplomacy was unfolding under the shadow of force, with both sides still speaking of negotiations, while also preparing for the possibility that talks might fail. Despite those formal signs of progress, the article says outside observers remained deeply skeptical that the diplomacy could close the gap between the two sides. Sanam Vakil, director of the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House in London, told CBS News that in her view, a military clash was imminent and that war looked inevitable. The article says she argued that President Trump had not only assembled a large military force capable of striking Iran, but had also clearly signaled that he was seeking the submission of the Islamic Republic to terms that Iran's leaders do not appear willing to accept. Vakil said the main concession Iran could offer would be a commitment not to enrich uranium above a certain level inside the country for a number of years. She also said it's worth noting that Iran is already not enriching uranium and had not been doing so since the June war, when the United States struck Iran's nuclear facilities and buried its enrichment program. In that context, she suggested Tehran could present that position as a concession. The article says Secretary of State Marco Rubio also told reporters on Wednesday that Iran is not currently enriching uranium, but added that it is trying to get to the point where it ultimately can. Vakil said Iran is also seeking recognition of its nuclear rights as a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. According to the report, she said Tehran does not want to be singled out and wants to be treated like other signatories, while seeking the ability to enrich uranium at very low levels for medical purposes. The article then turns to CBS News contributor Masih Aliinejad, an Iranian-American journalist and activist, who said before the talks in Geneva that the maximum concessions Iran's rulers can offer would not meet the White House's minimum requirements. She said both sides have red lines, and that it was hard to see how a deal could be reached without one side making major concessions. The report notes that Aliinejad referred to rumors that the Trump administration might consider an arrangement allowing Iran to keep what she described as a token enrichment program as a research facility. Even so, she said because of Trump's strong criticism of the earlier Obama-era agreement, he now needs what she called a much better deal. The report says the technical details of Iran's nuclear program remain central to the talks, with the head of the IAEA again joining the delegations in Geneva. Aliinejad also said Iran's ballistic missiles were a major concern, pointing to the